Today on the Perception and Action podcast, coach education workshops. Do they change coaching behavior in the intended way? What are the keys to getting them to work? And an exciting announcement about my new book. So it's time for a call to action. Hi, this is Rob Gray from Arizona State University. I've been on a now over 25-year journey as a researcher, professor, and high-performance consultant to understand how we acquire and adapt our perceptual motor skills. Welcome to the Perception and Action podcast, where I discuss how psychological research can be applied to improving performance, accelerating skill acquisition, and designing technologies. Now on to the show. Hi, everyone. In today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about coach education and some recent really good papers that I found. And at the end, I'm going to have a really exciting announcement related to this, so hold on to the end. So what I want to talk about today are kind of workshops and co-created and interactive workshops for coach education. This is something that I've been using myself for the last few years. For example, two of the ones I like to give are on designing effective constraints and designing effective cues. So what I do for these is, I talk to the kind of team administrator, what problems are people having, what are the specific coaching situations they're finding difficulty, the team's having, and I talk to the coaches and do the same. Then we have a workshop where we kind of throw out coaching scenarios, things we want to try to change about an athlete, very specific to the sport I'm in, and then we talk through what constraints. The one workshop we talked through what constraints we might use, what the logic of adding this constraint is, and I give them some ideas. They throw out a lot of the ideas themselves, and I at the end I create, as I talked about in my last book, we end up with a constraints matrix, right? So what are possible constraints we could manipulate for this situation? And it's a really useful exercise, I think, in generating one of these. In particular, it gets people to go through the thought process and understand how you can design them for yourself. I like to do a similar thing with cueing, right? Here, what we're trying to do is really get away from using so many internal, bodily-focused technical cues and think of analogies or external cues we could use instead. So we come up with what are your favorite cues I usually start with, and how can we change that? And as I said before in my book, I'm not saying that you can never use internal cues, but I think having options is always good for a coach. So I've had a lot of success with these, and they're two of my favorite things to do with coaches and teams I work with. So I was very excited to find out that there are a couple papers that have evaluated these, collected data and evaluated the effectiveness of these. And these are by Matthew Andrew, Paul Ford, and colleagues. There's two papers. They're linked in the show notes. The first one's called, the first one focuses on the difference between technically focused drill-like practice and game-like practice, like small-sided games and things. The first thing they do is they go out and measure how often the coaches are using each of these, and not surprisingly, before their intervention, the dominant, I think at least 65%, 70% of drills are technical focused. And then they did their workshop where they talk to coaches about the benefits of small-sided games. They teach them how to design it, and then they observed and they noticed this significant change. For the cueing one, they went out and watched. Again, they did observation of practice before the workshop, and what they did was they noticed that coaches use a lot of cues, what they call concurrent cues during when the athlete is performing the action, and they noticed that at least 60% of them were internally focused on, hit the ball with the side of your foot. I've covered a difference between internal and external many times on this podcast. So then they did the co-creation workshop, where they explain the benefits of external cues, talk about the research, and then they show coaches how to change cues to just like I've been doing. And what they found was the proportion of cues significantly changed from pre to post a workshop. You get more use of external cues. So I think this is an effective way. I found this a very effective way to get coaches using these different approaches just showing them a research and telling them about it is one thing, but you actually do these interactive workshops where you kind of the experience in actually doing it, right? So in baseball, sometimes we stand in the batting cage and they're getting knowledge of, right? They're actually doing it in the context of their specific sport. A lot of times I don't even have to say very much. Coaches come up with great ideas on their own. I just kind of help them understand, okay, what is this achieving? What might this achieve? And I think it's very effective. But check out these 2 papers. They're really, really good. I think they provide, good research evidence for something I've anecdotally found a lot of success with. Okay, so that's the main thing I want to talk about. The second thing is the announcement. I have another new book coming out. So my new book is going to come out I'm setting a target for 6 months from now. So it's coming soon, sort of. It's still a while off. But I have it. It's available on Amazon. The Kindle ebook version is available on Amazon now for pre-order. The paperback, you can't do pre-orders with paperbacks for some reason on Amazon. That will be released at the same time. This is going to be the 3rd book in the series, How We Learn to Move, Learning to Optimize Movement. Whereas those first 2 books focused on skill acquisition in athletes and skill development in athletes, in this book I want to turn to skill acquisition and skill development in coaches, right? So how can a coach develop their skill? And the book title is called Learning to Be an Ecological Coach, Developing Attuned and Adaptable Coaching Skills, right? So basically what I want to try to do in this book is take the research evidence and studies like the ones I just talked about, and also my experiences from being a skill acquisition specialist, with the Boston Red Sox and working with a bunch of other teams. How can you learn to coach in a manner that's aligned with the ecological approach, right? Allowing for self-organization, guiding self-organization, direct perception, taking into account using the constraint set approach, differential learning, and so on. So the things I'm going to, talk about in this book, I'm going to talk about, the role of research and theory in coaching, and a little bit for the first. Then we'll talk about a kind of constraints-led model, how we can manipulate constraints to improve our coaching ability. Talk about observing movement from a different perspective and cleaning your lens as you observe the movement of your athletes. Talk about things like how to manipulate difficulty and variability, how to use things like imagery and things like that, following an ecological approach. Then we'll get into a little bit about my thoughts on how we can use technology and track practice in terms of the gains our athletes are making. Again, all following an ecological approach. So these are some thoughts. I think hopefully you find this useful, and so as I said, watch it. You can pre-order that book on Amazon. The link is in the show notes. So I hope you'll find it useful. I'm really excited to have this come out. So that's all I got for today. This is again me from the road at spring training. So I might have one more episode of these coming next time before I get back to my regularly scheduled episodes. Thank you for entertaining these off-the-cuff ones. I really appreciate it. Okay, that's it for today's episode. Remember, you can contact me at robgray@asu.edu or follow me on Twitter at ShakyWeights. To find out more about the podcast, please check out perceptionaction.com. Finally, to support the podcast and receive bonus materials, including a monthly coaches meetup, please head over to patreon.com/perceptionaction. This is Rob Gray from ASU. Cheers for now, and keep 'em coupled. Gone through St. Louis.